day. We're at Money 2020 Europe, and with me is Thad Vorozilchak from IBM. If in this interview I was only allowed to mention two words and then remain totally silent, those words would be artificial intelligence, AI. Thad, please summarize for us what it is, where it is, and perhaps most importantly, where it's going.
Wow. Andrew, first of all, thanks for this interview. Thanks for spending the time with us today. I think what you would unpack in two words would take me years to answer your questions. But you're right, it's the dominant word and phrase that we're hearing everywhere,
yes.
Not just in banking, but across industries. And I think for IBM, it's been part of our history and our heritage really since the 50s. So when folks think about IBM, they think about oftentimes our history and the longevity of our business and how much we've changed. But one thing that's not changed throughout that history is our commitment to innovation. And so as part of that, artificial intelligence has been part of our corpus. You mentioned where it's been. It's, for us, investments in AI have meant things like beating folks in checkers, then beating them in chess, then competing on things like Jeopardy. And those are the things that if you were not familiar with anything other than AI and IBM, you might think about as IBM. But where it is today is somewhere that is unique. I think with regards to what we've done with AI, what the industry and the world has done with AI, up until November of 2022, could be put into one block. So large language models weren't part of our corpus. Foundation models weren't part of the corpus. And then along came OpenAI and ChatGPT, and in particular GPT 3.5, which exposed the world to the promise of artificial intelligence in foundation models and large language models. And I think really provided us with that Netscape moment, if you will, that we saw in the early 2000s with the internet. We were able to put a name on something because we were able to bring that to consumers. Now, in the backdrop, what's been going on up to that point and where we're going as IBM is large language models have been a part of our corpus and the way that we develop technology for a number of years. In fact, for the past 3 years at minimum in products that we offer in our chatbots and in our discovery tools in Watson Assistant and Watson Discovery, both Watson named tools, our AI tool set, you've seen things like large language models in addition to traditional ML. Where we're going, because I said I could go on forever, I'll put a period on that for a moment. Where we're going is very much in the direction of enabling companies, in this case, banks and financial institutions, to do a few things. One is to take advantage of trusted models, and trusted is very important. Ethical is very important. Explainable becomes very important. And I'm putting those monikers in front of AI because those things are going to dominate the landscape, especially in highly regulated industries such as banking. So we're giving companies and financial institutions in particular the ability to do a couple of things. One is to bring their own models, because while vastly expensive to build your own foundation model, it's still very much possible. And IBM has invested in technology and infrastructure such as our supercomputer, our Vela computer, that will allow for the build of your own models. But we're not stopping there. With our recent announcement of Watson X, which we announced at our Think conference earlier this year, we're also allowing companies to take their own models, or our models that we build, or other models brought from the open source community, announced through our partnership with Hugging Face, and build unique models that, again, remain trusted. Or, ultimately, they may use models from IBM, which are built on a trusted foundation, a trusted corpus of data, and really built in a transparent way so that they become usable for business. To encapsulate all of that, I would say AI has a long history at IBM.
Yes.
AI has very much entered the vernacular of the consumer space, and yet there still is work to be done to bring it to its full potential in the business sphere, especially in highly regulated industries such as ours. And the way that that will be done is through transparent models and transparent applications of AI. That's the future as we see it.
When you talk about models, are you talking about models for credit analysis? That is to say, a bank making a decision whether to lend X or Y
Sure.
to person or business Z? Or is it much more than that?
Yeah, I think so. Yes, and so credit risk analysis is a great application of the potential of a foundation model to give the end user, or the bank in this case, the ability to score at a scale that they've never been able to do before, and use alternative methods to FICO or other traditional methods. So you could, in fact, in this case of credit risk analysis, develop your own model that's based upon a large language model, for instance, which is very good at doing prediction. So a foundation model of that type. You could develop your own credit scoring model based upon that AI model if and only if you can truly trust what the model puts out.
Yes.
And that's where we come into play with building the foundation models, the large language models that would support that credit risk analysis or that credit risk model. But the applications are endless, so they could go beyond credit risk analysis, they could go into customer service, they could move throughout long-term applications such as how do we cross-sell, upsell.
Yeah.
The applications are just innumerable. So, and that's an important distinction because what you brought up in the case of a model is the traditional way of how we think of scoring. What I'm talking about with regards to models are, again, those foundation
Yes.
models upon which we can build other permutations.
Are you finding big interest from non-financial organizations?
It's huge, and really it's, I love that question because I think financial organizations in large part are becoming non-financial organizations in the way that they want to differentiate and serve their customers. So I think, yes, and again, AI's promise, again, I'll go back to the analogy of the early days of the internet when everybody was putting an I in front of anything that they said.
Yes.
Your I blazer and your I hat would have been perfectly suited for the early 2000s. And now it is GPT or LLM at the end of every word. So I think while it has some ubiquitous promise across all industries, again, that application and really beginning with still understanding your business and what's core and essential to your business will allow you to apply it in the proper ways.
So, in terms of the endless possibilities, you can have situations where company X that's got nothing to do with finance knows a whole lot of things about its customers, but by working with you, with their own models or somebody else's models or your models, can work out how to improve their business dealings with their customers.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think it's scale and speed is what the true promises are for not only AI, but generative AI as well. If you can imagine the early applications that we're seeing from companies like ChatGPT or Microsoft, even with their Copilot initiative, you see that the early endeavors are still moving just from the consumer sphere. So meaning they're helping with things like, for instance, generating an interview question and
Yes.
answer pairs, or providing faster and more rapid ways to generate small consumable content. But what we're talking about that I think will be that next leap, where you're really going to want to have that trusted model to give you, and transparent model that you can then show to not only the regulators, which are going to be very important in driving this conversation in banking, but also your consumers themselves to build trust. That's going to take a different type of instantiation of this model, and then once that takes hold, it's going to become far more ubiquitous.
In other words, it'll go from being a purely B2B thing to a certain extent being a B2C thing.
Yeah, B2C, B2B, I think the applications, again, are unlimited. But, let's back up a second, because I think, we can talk about the technology in AI, which is critical.
Yes.
And certainly that landscape is changing while we're talking, right? I'm sure that there are vendors on the floor here at Money 2020
Yes.
who have exciting new applications of AI that we at IBM haven't even thought of, or maybe we've only thought
Yes.
of in the corner of our minds. And those applications are going to those new applications are going to foster growth throughout this industry. But it doesn't change one thing, which is understanding who you are as a business, understanding who your target market is as a consumer, or who your target partners are who help make you better for that consumer is still critical and fundamental. And I think as we look to adopt AI in mass and at scale, to provide that scale and speed for both our consumer-oriented and B2B applications, it's going to be even more critical to know who you are.
Yes.
Earlier today, I was having a conversation in which we were describing the choice that you have now to take on new projects because of AI, much like the cereal aisle in a large grocery store.
Yes.
There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of choices of ways that you can apply it. So it's become more critical than ever to understand how that application will best serve you and your business, your consumer, how it will provide a proper return on investment, and not just fall into the trap of the next shiny object or dazzling thing.
Are you seeing any geographical variations on this? For example, are IBM's clients in North America asking for X in relation to AI, while your clients in Europe are asking for Y?
Yeah, what I see, so far, and again, we're in early days, is really the regulators and the government bodies playing a role early on, more so across Europe than I see in the States. Christina Montgomery, for instance, our Chief Privacy and Trust Officer, testified before a subcommittee of Congress in the United States, alongside Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, about regulation and about the ways that we think that AI should be regulated. And really her point of emphasis was not to focus so much on regulating the models and the AI that's produced, because to some extent that's like trying to stop the tide, but rather to focus on the end application of that AI, which I personally, even as an IBMer, but personally think is very brilliant, because it's where we apply that AI that's going to have the most meaning and impact to the consumers at large.
Absolutely.
I think if we do that, and if we focus on things like trust and transparency, which IBM is very focused on, then we'll have an opportunity to apply that AI in a way that's both meaningful and safe for all of its end users and the consumer base. And I think that will follow along with what we're seeing in these early days from the regulators.
Are there any regulators that stand out as regulators that understand this sort of thing and therefore ahead of the curve relative to others, or are they struggling to keep up with a massive and rapidly changing new industry?
Look, I don't think that there's a regulatory body in this world that's keeping up right now. But I'll be clear, I also don't think that any technologists are keeping up right now. It's one of the first times in history where the technology is outpacing the technologists themselves.
Yes.
We're scrambling to keep up with what the possibilities are, and to do it in a way that's, again, meaningful, ethical, trustworthy. I think those are the areas where we're putting focus right now, because the technology won't be the challenge in terms of what it can do. The challenge lies in how do we responsibly apply that technology in a way that is, in the long term, beneficial to society, augments human intelligence, and is applicable to the businesses that we serve.
These are huge questions which will have to be resolved in the next 2 to 3 years.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I think, it needs to be resolved on a daily basis, and only because the technology, again, continues to exponentially grow. So it's not a problem, and I love the way that Christina puts it forward. It's not a challenge that we can look to a single regulatory body or multiple regulatory bodies to solve for us. I think it's a challenge that will be solved in partnership between consumers of the technology, producers of the technology,
and the independent regulators.
Exactly right. Together, working as one. We're going to have to do that as an industry, because we haven't seen anything like this ever.
Thank you. A statement like that, I think, is perhaps the ideal point to close the interview, but I will make this final question. We've had a very wide-ranging discussion. Are there any aspects of AI that you think we should have talked about but haven't?
You know what? Yes, and I think this. I think it's easy to get sucked into the hype, if you will,
Yes.
of generative AI. But AI is already very useful in the world that we live in. So a bit of a shameless plug for IBM. We're leaders in several areas of AI today. If you look at conversational AI or traditional chatbot areas, or if you look at information discovery, those are two areas where the analysts have ranked us as leaders for years. And we continue to play a prominent role, especially in financial institutions. So as for instance, one of our reference customers, Citigroup, uses our Watson Assistant and Discovery extensively across a corpus of 2,500 auditors to save tremendous amounts of time and energy and billable hours, mind you, all in a way that is very useful to them without using any generative techniques. So if I were to close with one thought, it is, know that applications for AI exist in a very safe and meaningful way today. Know that generative AI and foundation models, while the future, still will require some work and some forethought to really balance and provide core direction from the business, or take core direction from the business. And then at the end of the day, know that all of this, none of this is a substitute rather for good business practices applied to the same strategic initiatives that I see throughout the financial services industry, which in large part are reimagining the experience for the customer and employee,
Yes.
what we're doing for the environment and
Yes.
ESG, having a resilient infrastructure that's ready to take on the cyber attacks that are so prominent in our industry today, and really working to modernize in a meaningful way that entire infrastructure. None of that changes because of generative AI. AI can only help enhance that, but we still have to go about the business of our business.
Absolutely. Thank you, Thad, very much indeed.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.